Hello, everyone. Pleasure to be here today with all of you, and of course, to have such an interesting group of panelists with me. Anne, Antonis, Iker, great to have you here. Prior to moving into questions, can you share some background about yourself, particularly in the context of our discussion today, individuals and family office experience? Anne, if it's okay, maybe to start with you.
Sure. Thank you, everyone. I'm excited to be on this panel today. My background is I grew up in the United States in a family of wealth. My wealth came primarily from affordable housing real estate, and I think that really set the scene for how I've always framed my values and how you can make money and do good at the same time. I also grew up in a family of philanthropy. So I think that that's a very strong part of what I do every day and who I am. Around the age of 16 or 17, I was given a book at Christmas on impact investing. It was around the same time in San Francisco that SoCap started. And I read this book and I became fascinated by this subject. I went to SoCap. I was very early and invested in the first JP Morgan Global Health Fund. And then I got very disillusioned by the whole impact scene. I felt like there was a lot of talk and not much action. So I kind of took a step back until 3 years ago, and I started my own sustainable fashion company. And I ran that for quite some time in New York. And then recently I moved away from that, and I'm now engaging with my wealth, and I run our family's philanthropic foundation, Freyja, which is endowed, and we are implementing an impact strategy on that. And currently I live in London, and I'm excited to chat to everyone today.
Antonis, please.
Yeah, so I'm Greek German. I live in Munich, Germany, and my family wealth comes from the pharmaceutical industry, a company that was started after the Second World War and sold in 2006. And yeah, I'm involved in my family's family office, where I do my private impact investments into impact investing funds. So as a rule of thumb, I don't do directs, I do fund investments, and I focus on new vehicles, so first-time funds, first-time managers, and try to find funds that are not oversubscribed and that have difficulties raising capital. So typically funds that are smaller than 50 million euros. I also started a foundation called Guerrilla Foundation that's focused on systemic change and supporting grassroots social movements in Europe. And I'm also involved in a university unit at the University of Zurich that focuses on research around sustainability and private wealth. And yeah, that's a bit of a short version of me.
Sure. Last but not least, Iker, please tell us about yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. So I'm based in Valencia, in Spain, and essentially I run Zubi Labs. And 12 years ago, I started a fintech company that this year was listed on NASDAQ. And since 2014, since I founded Zubi Labs, my idea was to gear my time, my energy, my resources into creating companies that beyond a market financial return could also have a social and environmental impact. That's kind of the first part of Zubi Labs, and we have a network of schools, we have various impact real estate projects, we have impact tech companies, and then during COVID last year, we kicked off the second pillar of Zubi Labs, which is Zubi Capital, and it's to create funds where we act as an anchor investor that invest in companies outside our group of companies. And in this case, it's something that wasn't filled in the market, which is a venture debt fund focused on impact. And that's kind of how we're thinking about creating maybe funds or vehicles that are filling voids in the market that are yet, that are pieces of the puzzle, that are necessary pieces of the puzzle. And then the third aspect is the family office that we're creating. and we're taking an approach from a perspective of catalytic capital, of using these as anchor investors, as we need to take the initial risk in some of our companies. And then as this grows, we will have co-investors. So we say in Zubi Labs, we mobilize talent because we create companies, we create funds, but we also mobilize co-investors. So our idea is to take that role of catalytic capital so that others can build on top and come in as co-investors and achieve market returns as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Very interesting. Lots in common, but also some key distinct approaches. Still on the personal side, have you found family support and relatives buying into your story and interest, or more of a muted type of reaction and or skeptical looks? Do you want to start, Anne? And maybe we just go around or make it interactive.
Of course.
Yeah. Anne, you want to go first?
Okay, sure. So Freyja, our foundation, is an endowed foundation, which means that it has a portfolio. And our family office consists of my brother and myself. So luckily, decision making is quite easy and we get along very well. And we believe that how you do one thing is how you do everything. And it's really important that if our philanthropy is focused on climate and conservation, that our portfolio is a reflection of our values and that we can use impact investing using all of our resources. So it's positive. I do think that we still have constructive conversations, and we use an investment committee that I feel like kind of provides that buffer, so we don't just go ahead with all decisions kind of blindly.
Antonis, please.
Yeah, so I mean, for me in the beginning, there was quite a lot of skepticism around the topic because, you know, people think you're squandering money, it's philanthropy, and yeah. But I think as the years went on and this whole sector has become much more mainstream, there's less skepticism. So I think like by now there's very little skepticism, and the sustainability topic is a mega trend that will you know, not go away, just like tech. And so there's a lot of interesting investment opportunities. So yeah, I think it's never been easier to convince someone that impact investing makes sense, financially speaking.
In my case, maybe it has been easier because it's first generation. So, and I would say probably my wife it's been one of the big reasons of me why I'm actually in impact. Because when while I was running this fintech company, she created a foundation. So, and maybe when I started first company with a certain purpose, but I wasn't calling it impact. I wouldn't even call it an impact company, what I created. But then I decided, wow, you know, and I think she opened my eyes in that sense. We have to figure out how we engage our children in all these. They're still small, so we have a bit of time. But as we're thinking, and to be honest, I mean, we're building so we're putting together the building blocks as we're walking. I mean, that's full honesty. And as entrepreneurs, we try to, you know, and sometimes we get into too many things at the same time. So there's a process there. But I'm also trying to, I'm thinking of Zubi Labs as a way, as a platform to empower talent and enable talent to align their work with their purpose and their impact, whether it's, and very different themes, I would say. You know, one thing is fighting, you know, poverty, to climate change, to create a more circular economy or sustainable communities. And we work along many of these themes. So we have a very decentralized structure in the sense that when we create ventures, you know, we feel as co-founders, we invest in them, but the future of these companies is determined by the people that are running it, the same as the funds. So in some sense, we're the glue that sticks all together. And I'm, in some sense, when I'm thinking about kind of all our contribution is made effective by all these people that are on the ground that are making it possible, which in some sense I consider part of the broader picture of the family.
Yeah. So in your case, Iker, someone else brought you in. You were the one buying. So great.
Yeah, we always need someone. To be honest, I think we always need someone there to help us open our eyes. And to be honest, I'm very grateful because I think everyone has sees something. There was someone in their way that philanthropically, with no return expected, helped them on that path. And I think a role that we can also play with other people in our paths.
Yeah, great. How do you think about your family office and wealth, such as to have a lasting impact? So do you assign a budget to your philanthropic goals, Antonis, or you go about it on demand as projects come along? And Iker, what is basically your framework of thinking how to use your wealth?
Shall I go first?
Yes, please.
So yeah, I mean, of course, I set a yearly budget for philanthropy, although sometimes I have troubles keeping it. So I spend between 1 and 2 million euros on philanthropy a year. And what was the second question?
And the second question, well, is actually if you are going on demand or following a budget, and I guess we already got the answer.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes like the grants that I give are between 10 and 20,000 euros, and so like basically it's more on demand basis, like when I see that there's urgent demand. But I guess I have a big problem, a character trait. I have sometimes trouble saying no. I want to help everyone, but I'm hoping to get better at that too.
You are still going for the lasting impact also time-wise. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and I also think that there's obviously this idea that if you spend like the value, I mean the investments and the donations you make now, will create a higher impact if you look at the next 10 years, where we have to turn the ship around in terms of destroying the environment. I think it makes a lot of sense to really ramp it up in the beginning and then go a bit down. So that's also a bit how I think about it, is go more, maybe spend a bit more now and a bit less later.
Right. And before you mentioned into your introduction about the endowment, your family upbringings, and so it seems there has been some wealth planning behind your interests. How do you think about it on a day-to-day basis?
So for our foundation, my brother and I a few years ago sat down and we wrote our obituaries, which is slightly morbid, but we really wanted to figure out what we wanted to be known for. Like, what do we want? We've been given this gift of wealth. So if we were to leave, like, what is our lasting legacy? How do we really make sure that we're having an impact? And I don't mean that in terms of our own egos and names, but how are we, catalytically changing something? And so when we think about our philanthropy, we only have 2 projects that are both 8-year projects. We really like scale, and we believe in long-term. Usually if that's investing, it's the same as in our philanthropy. And we have a focus on land conservation and education. So we both directly give grants to 2 organizations, and alongside we run projects ourselves. So our main project is we're building or helping expand the Patagonia National Park down in Argentina. And we're running rewilding, and we are building trails, and we are trying to make it an incredible national park. But the long-term goal there is that we are putting something into permanent protection. And for us, from a conservation perspective, whether this project, the trails are maintained or the campgrounds are there, at least we'll have conserved a vast amount of land, and that's the goal.
Is it open to visit, just out of curiosity? Or,
yes, you can come and visit, but it would probably be best to visit in like a year and a half when we're finished some of the trail networks. But it's an incredible park, and the rewilding project is off the ground, and you can come and see loads of pumas and guanacos and birds and cave paintings.
We will reconnect in 1 year.
Okay.
No excuse. Great. Iker, what about yourself, being a founder of a company, an anchor investor of a debt fund? So how do you think about budgeting, planning your wealth?
So to be honest, I think we're at the point of inflection, because in previous years of FI, I've been sharing some of the projects of the operating companies, how, looking for a school in Valencia, and for my children after in a school, and then from a school, how that has grown into a district, and then how we create those companies that address some of the challenges we've lived when we're creating the district. I think now I'm trying to take a bit more of a top-down approach and saying, okay, from a systemic standpoint, what are the challenges, social and environmental, where we can add most. So we actually created a new team this year, a new company of the group's called Hands-on Impact, to think a bit more strategically on, first of all, from a private perspective, from a private sector, where we can add, what are the missing elements of the puzzle, and how that creates a framework on how we're going to gear our investments through our funds or operating companies. And then, of course, how that gets deployed then, it's, with the entrepreneur or the fund manager, that it's aligned with that purpose. So we're trying to move a little bit more from very action-oriented, we find a problem and we're trying to solve it, to, is that the right problem to solve? Is that the right way to solve that problem? And what is our additionality that we can actually create there?
Mm-hmm. Great. So now moving to the outcomes, because impact is also about investing, and investing, generally speaking, is about economic outcomes, preferably positive outcomes, and often very short-term outcomes. What are your thoughts about measurable outcomes, and how much importance do you need to give them on your decisions? And let's start with you, Antonis, coming from the philanthropic or being more focused on the philanthropic side. I guess it's more challenging to put, or it may be more challenging.
Yeah, I mean, with regards to the Gorilla Foundation that I founded, where we focus on activists and social movements, measuring impact is actually not that easy. I mean, we encourage our grantees to collect data and various impact KPIs, but oftentimes it's difficult because they're small groups, so they don't have the capacity to get the data. And if you're trying to influence a discourse on systemic change, it's also not that easy. But I mean, for the impact investing projects, I'm invested in funds that measure the impact. So they produce impact reports. Of course, some are better than others. But on the philanthropy side with activism, it's quite a challenge. And I mean, one thing that we're trying to do in terms of like impact with the Gorilla Foundation is also influence the philanthropic discourse around giving and promoting this idea of participatory grant making, which means that you integrate the target group into your strategy and your decision making, and think about power sharing and meeting the grantees eye to eye. So with the Gorilla Foundation, we also have activists on our board who co-decide with us and the team on the grants. And yeah, I think that also has really improved the quality of our work and our processes. And I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's a challenge. It's easy also to hide behind no results, no outcomes, the lack of success. So I guess you need to measure and somehow, maybe not through something quantifiable, but qualitative. But yeah. Iker, what about yourself as an investor too?
So our approach is market returns. So all we do, at this time, we aim to make market returns, But of course, all the companies, all the funds are impact funds. That's the first way I'm trying to tackle it. And then I still have a lot of work, and maybe it's, coming years projects to define the philanthropic strategy. So I think it's just from moving from, hey, percentage of profits goes to philanthropy, to thinking a bit more strategic level of philanthropy as well, and where you can also create a delta additionality and have a lasting impact, right? I'm taking this approach and trying at least to come from the company angle, because I would hope that the company participating in the market can be self-sustaining over time. But I also recognize that some challenges are very hard to solve with market forces and companies, and there is room for philanthropy. In some sense, our vision with Zubi Labs is all these companies that we're creating, in which the teams have equity or a similar sort of compensation, so we share the upside. The participation that Zubi Labs has in these companies, we hope that eventually, when there's an exit or dividends, gets reinvested in creating new companies, more ambitious, more companies, more ambitious, being able to invest more. That's kind of the first virtuous circle I'm trying to create and get in motion, and then thinking through maybe a second step, how to think through philanthropy.
Great. And before you mention about long term, you have a long term view. So are measurable outcomes important to you, and how do you place them in?
I definitely think.
Oh, sorry. I thought it was a question
Go
from
ahead.
me. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to add, sorry. Around measuring. So I think when we create companies, we create a theory of change, we create the metrics, and I think it's critical for, just to add that. Sorry, I'm interrupting.
No problem. Yes, measurable outcomes are very important. I think what is great about working in the world of conservation and rewilding is that it is very easy in a way to track your measurable outcomes, especially because you can count the amount of pumas that are on the land, and how many meters of trails, and how many small businesses have been created. So we do track that, and we have our 2 grantees measure that. And while I think that's very important for our KPIs and moving forward with our project, I actually encourage it more for their other donors, because I do know that some donors really care about those sorts of metrics. So from a philanthropic perspective, that's important. And yeah, of course, we want to make sure that we're having long-term lasting effect that's measurable. In terms of our investment, I agree. The core focus of our portfolio is we would like to have market returns. We are not spending down, so it's very important for us to meet our grant allocation for every single year, as well as to continue to grow the portfolio in a clean and value-aligned way. And within our portfolio, we have a carve-out where we are in the process of implementing thematic investments. So we really care, we're conservation focused. We really care about carbon. We really care about supply chains. And so we can invest in companies that we know are going to have a measurable impact in, say, reducing water usage for permanent crops, or all around those types of themes.
Great. Well, now I feel I have huge responsibility in my hands, because we got very little time, so I have to pick one question. What would be your piece of advice for others like you, seeking to have an impact? So, and what would be your piece of advice?
Just start small. It doesn't have to be big. Roll up your sleeves and jump in. And then you can start figuring out your strategy, because the most important thing, which I guess none of us have really mentioned yet, is that you have joy in doing this, that it brings you happiness and fulfillment, and you don't know that until you start trying.
Yeah. What about you, Antonis?
Yeah, I agree. The same. I mean, it makes sense to really map the system and the ecosystem in the beginning, and join some networks like Tonic or Creo or the Impact, and also co-invest with others in the beginning. You know, find some people that you trust that are also good sources of deal flow, and I guess Impact Assets 50 is also a very good resource if you're starting out, which is this ranking of the 50 best impact funds by Impact Assets, and so map the ecosystem and get going, and start small, grow.
Get started. Yeah. Yourself, please, Iker.
I was just going to say, first is like figure out what matters to you. Sometimes it's very straightforward and sometimes it's not. And I just feel because, we're given this fortune to be, doing, some years in this wonderful planet. And I think it's what we want to do about it, right? And with that time. And I think that links very personally to what matters to each of us, which might be very different. And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. And I think once you have that clear, you can start reaching out to people that are doing work there, or maybe you think about starting something, or maybe you see a gap that isn't solved and you cannot stop thinking about it, and you gotta do something there. And there are many different ways. Sometimes you join a company that's doing a fantastic work there. You don't try to reinvent the wheel, or maybe you start a company, or maybe you're investing in that space. So I think there are multiple ways building on maybe the things that matter to you most.
Yeah, and multiple channels and currently this forum is an example of a way to reach out, to get to know people that are already doing it. So I'm sure some of our audience may want to reach out.